Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Cheese Twist Christmas Tree. That's right, 'tis the season when we have to make delicious holiday snacks. Whether it's to feed visiting guests or one of those parties where everyone has to bring a thing. And I think this beautiful, easier than it looks, pull-apart Christmas tree is the thing you should bring. I mean, you can't keep showing up with just a bottle of wine. Which reminds me, this goes great with a bottle of wine. So maybe bring both. And the first thing we'll need to get started is some frozen puff pastry, which for us home cooks never comes in a perfect square piece. All right, it's usually folded together somehow and looks like this with a bunch of annoying seams. And there are many things I miss about the professional kitchen. All right, the free food, the free booze, the free love. But one of the things I miss most is being able to work with perfect sheet pan sized pieces of puff pastry. But no matter how it comes, once we unwrap it, we'll go ahead and flour it lightly on both sides, and then attempt to roll it into a square about 1/8 of an inch thick. And then what we'll do once we've completed the rolling and the squaring is take a knife or a pizza wheel and cut from the bottom corner, or about 1 inch above the bottom corner, all the way up to the center point of the top. And we'll do that on both sides to form a triangle, which conveniently is about the same shape as a Christmas tree. And then once those cuts have been made, we will transfer this piece onto a Silpat lined baking sheet, and we will pop that in the fridge until we need it. At which point we're going to take those 2 pieces of dough we just cut off, and we're going to place those together, overlapping them by about 1/2 inch or so. And we'll push and press those together to form a second triangle, roughly the same size as the first. And then once we have that formed, we'll take a rolling pin to sort of flatten this out a little bit, and also to screw up the shape of the top. But not really. As you'll see, this is going to look great no matter how perfect or imperfect these pieces are. And that's it. We will carefully transfer that piece onto a lined sheet pan, and we'll transfer that into the fridge until we need it. And then we'll go ahead and grab that first piece on the Silpat and place that directly on the counter, since the pan is going to get in the way of what we need to do next. And that would be to take our pizza cutter and trim off about 1.5 inches from the bottom. And then we'll cut a piece off that piece to make the trunk, which we will simply create by sticking that underneath. And with the excess, you could, if you want, make a star, but I didn't. Okay, I didn't want to show off, and also I couldn't find my star cutter. But anyway, once our tree has been trunked, we'll go ahead and spread over our pesto sauce. Except we will leave about 1/4 inch of dough exposed around the outside, around the outside, around the outside. And by the way, the pesto is technically optional, and you can just make this with cheese. Or you could use other sauces like tomato-based sauces or pepper-based sauces. Okay, so this part's up to you. I mean, you are, after all, the me of making this tree. But I really do like the look and flavor the pesto brings. And then once that's been sauced, we'll go ahead and grate over a generous amount of cheese, which in my case is going to be some Parmigiano Reggiano. But of course, any other grateable cheese you like will work. Oh, and speaking of the holidays and cheese, if you're stuck for what to give someone as a gift, a big old hunk of imported Parmesan cheese is always an excellent idea. All right, you can get a really nice large piece for about $25, so keep that in mind if you get stuck. But anyway, regardless of what cheese you end up using, we'll go ahead and place over that second triangle of pastry, and we'll do our best to stretch and pull and position it so it covers the first one, getting those edges lined up as evenly as we can. And if you have some extra dough like I did at the top, you can just yank that off. Or even better, grab the pizza wheel and trim it off. And since we're going to cut and twist these 2 layers together, we don't really have to get a perfect seal on the edges, but I do like to press them together a little bit, as well as sort of lightly press and pat that top layer pastry down into the cheese. And as I was finishing that step up, I realized I had some extra dough at the bottom that was hanging too far over and covering up my trunk, so I decided to trim some of that off, which for some reason I attempted to do with the pizza wheel, instead of a pair of scissors, which would have worked way better. But all's well that ends well. And for the next step, the pizza wheel is the perfect tool. And that's because what we'll do is make cuts from the bottom to the top, about every 3/4 of an inch or so, cutting almost, but not quite all the way to the center. All right, we want to leave about 1/4 to 1/2 inch uncut in the middle so this all stays together. And as we move up the tree and it gets kind of narrow, it's probably easier to start your cut in the center and move outward. And we'll go ahead and do that on both sides, making sure we line up those cuts the best we can. And then what we'll do once all those cuts have been made, we will simply take each section and twist it up like this. like maybe 3 or 4 times or whatever looks good to you. And as far as the direction for twisting, I think we should twist up towards the top of the tree, since branches and leaves always grow up towards the sun. Or am I overthinking this and it really doesn't matter? All right, there's really no way to know. Oh, and if you're wondering if it would be easier to do 2 at once, well, it seems like it would be, but it's not really. I actually think it's probably faster to go 1 at a time and use both hands. Until maybe we get near the top, where we're only going to be able to twist it like once anyway. And when we get to the very, very top, we probably can't twist it at all, which is why when I got to the top, I just basically started mangling it into some kind of irregular shape, mirroring the random imperfections of nature. And once we're happy with our twisting and our mangling, we will take a little bit of extra pesto and spread some on that exposed dough in the center of the tree, as well as any other spots we feel need it. Oh, and as you work on this, keep a couple things in mind. Almost everything we do with dough or pastry looks amazing once it's cooked. And also, besides that, there is no such thing as a perfect tree. So what I'm trying to say is that as you make this, please relax. And at this point, we can go ahead and transfer that back onto our sheet pan. And we will finish this up with one more generous grating of cheese. And of course, if you want to get really creative here, you could punch out some circles of red pepper to make ornaments, or maybe some anchovy tinsel. All right, so as usual, feel free to make yours look way better than mine. And that's it. This is now ready to transfer into the center of a 425-degree oven for about 30 minutes or so, or until our puff pastry is fully cooked and very well browned, and hopefully looking like this. And please listen carefully. The only way to screw this up is to undercook it. And culinarily speaking, there's absolutely nothing worse than undercooked puff pastry. It is pure evil. So basically, we want to bake this as brown as possible. So do not take this out of the oven until you're sure it's done. And then before serving, I do like to let this cool for about 15 minutes, which we should do on a rack so we have some air circulation underneath, which will help prevent the dreaded soggy bottom. And that's it. After letting that cool down a little bit, we can transfer that onto some attractive surface or platter, possibly next to some spicy tomato sauce to use as a dip. And that, my friends, was one bent trunk away from being perfect. So if you'll excuse me, I'm going to fix that right now. And that's it. I think you know the rest. We'll go ahead and pull off pieces and enjoy. And forget how gorgeous and adorable this is and that it looks like a Christmas tree. This is just a delicious thing to eat. Okay, crispy, buttery, flaky puff pastry wrapped around cheese and pesto is an absolutely stellar combination, whether we serve this with a dip or not. Although I have to say some type of dip is very nice. And because I'm home alone, I get to double and maybe even triple dip. And I'm not sure which part of the tree is more awesome. Those bigger, fatter bottom pieces that have a little more cheese and sauce in them, or the branches at the top, which don't have quite as much stuff. Because that section was thinner, it cooked up extra crispy and crusty, and that cheese is caramelized magnificently. But happily, we don't have to pick. We can just eat some of both. But anyway, that's it, what I'm calling Cheese Twist Christmas Tree, even though that's kind of hard to say, especially after a couple eggnogs. But it is not hard to eat, and really is a proven crowd pleaser. Not to mention highly versatile. You could use this exact same technique with different fillings and different cheeses and different garnishes. And yes, of course, you can also do sweet versions. So this really is something you can have a lot of fun with. But whether you experiment or not, or make it exactly as shown, I really do hope you give this a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.